Okay, I'm going to show you how to change out the switch, the light switch for the iPic PP table. This is the table where you turn it, and the light's supposed to light up, but it doesn't because this switch in here is actually wrong. It's not made correctly, and we're going to replace it to make it function correctly. And if you look to see how that works, there's a ramp. It actually comes around and pushes the plunger down. Okay, so that's very simple, but that's what we're going to fix. We're going to replace this here, and to do so, we got to remove this cover here, the front cover, which actually pulls straight out and lifts up and off. And then you got to take these two. There's a screw here and a screw underneath the bottom here. You take these two screws off, and this cover will come off. Okay, these are the tools I'll be using to do this. I have a screwdriver that uses multiple tips. I have a number 1 Phillips, a number 2 Phillips, and a number 4 hex drive. I have a tape measure, tie wraps, marking pen. This is the power supply for this aisle marker light. And I have a 1/2-inch drill bit, a pair of cutters, blue wire nuts, the replacement switch, and a drill. Alright, the cover's off, and we pull on this here. Alright, this is what you're going to be seeing inside. These are the white wires that go to the switch, and this is where they're connected. You're going to need to take these out. So we'll do that first, and then we'll continue on. Okay, the wires are disconnected. Now we'll move on to the next step, which will be to take the wood table off. There are 4 screws here, 2 on either side, that you'll have to remove to lift the table off. And we gotta be careful when we do that, and I'll show you in a minute when I get the screws off. Okay, the number 4 hex bolts are out. Okay, now this tabletop is loose, but you don't want to pick it up and just pull on it, because you'll see I'll show you a little better, there's packing tape on there which holds the wires in place in the channel so they don't get smashed when you bolt this down. So you gotta be very careful and do not lift this off and pull them at the packing tape loose. So what I do is I just kind of slide it forward towards the back of the chair to expose the 3 screws that hold this swivel plate on. And next you got to remove those 3 screws. Okay, the 3 Phillips screws are removed, and this swivel plate's free now. So all you got to do is slide this back as well to expose the switch. And you're going to see 2 Phillips screws holding this switch on. Older switches had a number 2 Phillips. The new ones have a number 1 Phillips. And that's probably what you're going to have is a number 1 Phillips. So you have to remove these 2 screws and pull this switch out. Okay, the switch is out, and this is what you'll have left. Just the hole with the 2 screw holes. Okay, now the replacement switch is very similar, but there's one big difference. It has a spacer. This spacer must be used or the switch will not work. So this will have to feed down through the hole. Let's see if I can do this on the camera. Okay, this is going to go right in here. Alright, so this is the replacement switch with the spacer on. That's what you're going to need to have. So I'm going to just put the replacement screws back in here and tighten them down. And this can actually be hooked back up to your connector at this time if you want to. Okay, the new switch is in with the spacer, and you got to make sure this ball moves freely. If these screws are over tightened, it will pinch the plastic, and this ball will not move freely, and your light will not work. So it's very important that you don't over tighten these 2 screws, and you must check to make sure this ball moves freely everywhere. Otherwise you're going to have problems. Alright, I've reconnected it to the box. It doesn't matter which connector you put the wires on. It's just a connection. So it doesn't matter. So that's that. Okay, next we have to put the swivel plate back on, which is a matter of sliding this back into position up here, and then we have to put this washer on. This washer slides up through, and you got to line up these holes. This is actually the nut. but it's a washer. It's got threaded holes in it, so the screws will come down and screw into this. So when you put the screws back through your swivel plate up here, they'll screw into these holes down here. And you got to make sure they line up, and you make sure that there's no wires or anything in between the two to pinch them. All right, we're going to do that right now. Okay, my screws are back in, and my nut is back on. There's no wires pinched around it anywhere, so it's all looking good. These 3 screws, by the way, control the tension on this swivel plate. So we want a little bit of tension on it so it doesn't just spin around freely. We want a little bit of drag on it. So you tighten up these 3 screws until you get that little bit of tension that we need. Next, we're going to put this top back on, and you basically just got to pull it forward and pull the wires down as you're doing it so that it doesn't pinch the wires. That's very important that we don't pinch the wires. So at the same time, you pull the wires down, slide the table across. Okay, the table's across, and now I am reinstalling the hex screws into the wood plate to fasten it. Okay, I just want to talk about how this is wired. We already know how to hook up these wires, but the black wires also gets tucked into this hole, and the female end, it's the old USB, the gray USB that comes from the table light comes down in here through here and goes through this hole and comes out here and then plugs into the female connector from this box. The other wire from the box comes out and plugs into this iPhone-like power connector, and this is going to plug into the power strip that's inside the center of the arm. That's going to plug in there, and this is going to get tucked up inside the mount right there. And that's all right. The table is now fastened. All the wires are hooked up and tucked away, and my table light is on, and I can test it to make sure it's functioning, and everything's good. Now I can replace this cover now with the 2 screws and put the front plate back on. Okay, cover plate's back on, and the front cover of the table's back on, and just testing again, and everything looks good, and you are done with that part.